Try that again. Welcome to Bible Study Live. My name's Colin Points. I'm the pastor of Winslow Christian Fellowship, and I'm going to spend the next hour or so looking at a passage of the Bible that I'm planning to preach on this coming week at Winslow Christian Fellowship on Sunday morning. So you get to see how I do it and how I go about it. And if you're interested in that, that just gives you a bit of an insight into how I think and how to go about looking at the Bible for yourself, hopefully. Also means that you're a bit better prepared when you come to church on Sunday. When you see me preach, you think, oh yeah, I know what this passage is about because I've already seen him begin to study it. So we're in 1 Peter. We've been studying 1 Peter for the last couple of weeks, and we're still on chapter 1, but we're looking at verses 13 to 25 this week. So I'm going to read that passage. Therefore, so it's following on from the previous passage. You're going to have to think about that. Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. And if you call on him as Father who judges impartially according to each one's needs, conduct yourselves with fear throughout the time of your exile, knowing that you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was made manifest in the last times for the sake of you, who through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. Having purified your souls by your obedience to the truth for a sincere brotherly love, love one another earnestly from a pure heart, since you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and abiding word of God. For all flesh is like grass, and all its glory like the flower of grass. The grass withers, and the flower falls, but the word of the Lord remains forever. And this word is the good news that was preached to you. So that's the passage, and sorry you couldn't read the last bit of it there as I was reading it out. Okay, so yeah, it starts off with a therefore, so that'll be the first thing we need to look at. Let's dive in, shall we? Verse 13. Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Prepare for action is how I've assumed, well, that's the title I was working with, but I'm not sure if that's right now looking at the ESV, because I was looking at the Anglicanized NIV version, which does say therefore prepare your minds for action, but it's interesting the ESV says therefore preparing your minds for action. That's a participle, that is, I guess. Looking at the Greek, yeah, it's a participle, anazonumi. Looking at the Greek here, dio anazanamenoi, anazosamenoi. That menoi makes it a participle, so it's not the key verb, nor is dianoias, which is exercise or your mind disposition. So where it says preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, these are not the key verbs. Set is the key verb. Set your hope fully. That's where this verse is. It's about setting your hope. It's assuming that we are preparing our minds and we are being sober-minded. So that's quite important to just get that translation clear, that it's not prepare your mind is not the that's not what he's telling them to do. He's assuming that they are preparing their minds. So straight in there, aren't we, with this verse? Let's start off with therefore follows on from the previous passage in which Peter was. What was he doing? He was encouraging them to have faith, I believe, because I preached on that yesterday, or the day before yesterday. So yeah, God has given us all this stuff. He's given us a hope. He's given us a imperishable inheritance kept in heaven for you. We're being guarded. Therefore, we have faith in God because the invisible is real. The future is certain. The prophecies are true. So Peter was encouraging suffering Christians to continue having faith, because, and these were my three headings, because the future is certain, the invisible is real, and the message is reliable. So those are my three headings. I can't spell. Now he's talking about the implications of continuing to have faith. Therefore, you've got faith, you're holding on in faith, therefore and the key here is to set our hope fully on grace. Okay. The bit about preparing our minds for action and being sober minded are taken for granted. They are participles. While we are setting our hope fully on grace, we are to be preparing our minds for action and sober minded. It's very mindful. It's about being very mindful, isn't it? So, preparing minds for action. So what's that mean? Preparing your minds for action. This is about having a presence of mind to do what needs to be done, but what kind of action is Peter thinking of here? Is it sharing the gospel? I mean, he's going to go on to talk about holiness. Not being conformed, being holy. He's going to go on to talk about not conforming, but instead being holy. And I guess that's what it's about then. So the action is probably talking about is living a Christian life in a world where that life doesn't fit. It's about swimming upstream. Going against the flow. Okay, so there's that. Sober-minded. Being sober-minded is another attitude kind of thing. Don't get carried away. Yeah, so I mean it's about not being drunk, isn't it? Sober. So don't get carried away, don't get intoxicated with the world, perhaps. Don't get intoxicated with the world's way of thinking. Don't let Twitter do your thinking for you. Or something. Okay, so, and then what are we doing? We're setting our hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Set your hope. We are to look forward to grace. We've been saved by God's grace, but this is about a future grace that we will get at the revelation of Jesus Christ. What does that mean then? At the revelation of Jesus Christ. Is that the second coming? Is this talking about the second coming? The judgment day? When we will be declared innocent despite being guilty? Despite being guilty, because that will be grace indeed. I think Oh boy, this deep theological stuff all contained within one verse. Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Verse 14, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. Okay. We are now part of God's chosen, God's family. Chosen, elected to be his children. And that means we should be obedient. And that obedience means not simply following our passions and instincts, but allowing our sober minds that are prepared for action to make us obedient. Yes. 15. But as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct. We need to be like God, and God is holy. What does holy mean? Set apart. Means set apart. If I put my holy, hagios, sacred, blameless, religious. Saint's most holy place, so it relates to, sometimes that word hagios talks about the most holy place, as in the temple, the part of the temple where God was, and often it's talking about saints. They are hagios, they are holy. So let's have a look. Hagos, or an awful thing. Okay, sacred, blameless, or religious. Vines says hagiosmos. That's a adjective, hagios, akin to a number 1 and 2, which are the same root as hagmos. Okay. Separated, among the Greeks, dedicated to gods, and hence in scriptural for its moral and spiritual significance, separated from sin and therefore consecrated to God. Sacred. it is predicated of God. It's set apart for God is basically what it's saying. It is used of men and things in so far as they are devoted to God. Set apart for God, devoted to God. Let's go back and set apart for God, devoted to God. This sainthood is not an attainment, it is a state into which God in grace calls men. Yet believers are called to sanctify themselves, hagios themselves, cleansing themselves from all defilements, forsaking sin, living a holy manner of life. This is interesting, yeah. Let's copy that, shall we? And put that in the note. Go back to 1 and 2. Holiness, separation to God, the resultant state of conduct befitting those separated. Sanctification is thus the state predetermined by God for believers into which in grace he calls them, and in which they begin their Christian course and so pursue it. Hence they are called saints hagioi. Hagiosun denotes the manifestation of the quality of holiness in personal conduct. It's used in Romans 1:4 of the absolute holiness of Christ in the days of his flesh, which distinguished him from all merely human beings. This, which is indicated in the phrase the Spirit of holiness, and in the vindication of it, his resurrection from the dead, marked him out as he was declared to be the Son of God. Believers are to be perfecting holiness in the fear of God, bringing holiness to its predestined end, whereby they may be found unblameable in holiness in the peruser of Christ. Okay, fair enough. So you've got a sense of holiness being this set apart, dedicated to God, devoted to God. So he is holy, he is set apart, he is God, and we're to be holy, completely God focused. We are his. We are his, and that should be seen in everything we do, because it says in all your conduct. Verse 16, since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. Peter quotes the Old Testament. Is it Exodus 19? Where's the doesn't give us a reference. Oh, Leviticus 11:44. Is that what it is? Fair enough. Leviticus 11:44, I am the Lord your God, consecrate yourselves to be holy because I am holy. Okay. Oh. So yeah, Peter quotes the Old Testament, which shows that this isn't just something that he thinks is a good idea. It's not a new idea. It's been there since the beginning. God's people should reflect God. We are his children, and so should bear the family likeness, not physically, but in the way we live our lives. Verse 17. And if you call on him as Father, who judges impartially according to each one's deeds, conduct yourselves with fear throughout the time of your exile. This is the verse that I read early on in the service on Sunday, because it was Father's Day. And I thought, well, that'd be good to pick on that particular verse, though it's not an easy verse to think about God's fatherhood. But it's a good verse. It talks about his fatherhood in a way that perhaps we don't often think. So, verse 17. Peter assumes that the Christians do call God Father, and since they do, there are implications. As a father, he is impartial, unbiased. He always knows and does what is right. As a father, I often don't know what's right and therefore can make wrong decisions for my children. I find that hard to believe, but I know in my head it must be true. I can make mistakes. But we judge on a father who judges impartially according to each one's deeds. He knows what we've done and what to do about it. Therefore, we should be motivated to live a life that is righteous, as in doing the right thing. As much as possible. Conduct yourselves with fear. The motivation is fear, which doesn't sound right. And yet we should fear God. Christ has died to take away the fear of God, and yet we should remember the awesome power and holiness of God that is deadly to us. That would be deadly to us if we were not shielded by Jesus's death on the cross. And it is deadly to all who are not shielded. Just talking about being shielded. I mean, that was the sermon title last week, but I'm going to just pick up on that. How hot does the heat shield on spaceship get when it's re-entering the atmosphere? How hot does the heat shield on a spaceship get? 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The Space Shuttle Thermal Protection System, thermal heat shield, is the barrier that protected the Space Shuttle orbiter during the searing 1,650 degrees centigrade, 3,000 Fahrenheit heat of atmospheric re-entry. The secondary goal was to protect from the heat and cold of space while in orbit. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I never knew that they were thinking about insulation while in orbit, but that does make sense. Always looking for a good illustration. Temperature on the Space Shuttle heat shield during re-entry equals 1,650 C or 3,000 Fahrenheit. So despite the fact that the astronauts were protected by the shield, no sensible astronaut would ever be how do you spell blase? Blase about re-entry. it's still an incredibly dangerous moment in any mission. The launch and re-entry. That's when astronauts have died, I guess, isn't it? The Space Shuttle Challenger blew up on launch for a couple of minutes after launch, and the Columbia burned up on re-entry. So they had nothing to fear, most astronauts, and yet they knew that you have to live with that fear and that respect. So I guess that's the fear of God in us, in that I know I am safe, but I also know that God is dangerous. That his danger is there, just on the other side of that shield, which is Jesus. A cool space illustration. Always pleased to get one of them. Verse 18, knowing that you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold. Ransomed. As we live holy lives, partly motivated by our knowledge of God's fierce righteous judgment, we should also remember that we have been ransomed. That is, we have been bought at a price. When someone is kidnapped, then when a rich person is kidnapped, there will usually be a demand for a ransom for their release. In Bible times, ransom would be paid. Is it the is that what it is? The ransom is lutro ransom. Is that talking about the redeem? Yeah, a redemption price. To ransom or redeem. No, we're not looking at that ergozo. We're looking at lutro, to release on receipt of ransom. In the natural sense of setting Israel free from the Roman yoke. So that's the Bible history connection anyway. Hang on, I've lost my notes. Where are my notes? if I manage to close my notes down. Let's go. Refresh the whole view. Right, in Bible times, a ransom would be paid to free a slave. Then it would be called a redemption price. And this same word is sometimes translated as redemption. In the Old Testament, the nation of Israel were redeemed from slavery in Egypt by God. So as Christians, a price has been paid to buy us free from slavery, to free us from being held captive by sin and death. You were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your fathers. So actually from a way of life that was pointless. That's what he's talking about there. So here Peter is talking about us being ransomed free from a way of life that was futile, without meaning, pointless. It's the way of life that we were brought up with. We inherited it. It's that word inheritance that we read about in the previous section. We read about an inheritance in heaven that is really precious, but what we lose is an inheritance that is pointless. So it's no loss. We've been ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold. People liked me talking about gold yesterday on Sunday. I think they that sort of stimulated their imagination. The ransom price was not paid with the usual currency. Silver or gold is not valuable enough to pay for our freedom from futility. This is good stuff. We're worth more than silver or gold. Our freedom from futile ways is worth more than silver or gold, perishable things. Verse 19, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. Interesting. Verse 19. This is the price that was paid for our freedom. The blood of Christ. His blood was like the blood of a perfect lamb. So this is a picture taken from the Old Testament redemption from Egypt. They were saved from the angel of death by the blood of a lamb that was put on their door frame. When the angel saw the blood, he would not visit them to take their firstborn, but would pass over the house. Ever since that day, Israel have celebrated their redemption from Egypt at a feast called the Passover. Jesus ate that feast with his disciples, and it was his last meal before he was put to death and shed his blood like a lamb. During that meal, he reinterpreted the meaning of two aspects of the meal. Instead of seeing the bread and wine as representing the body and blood of the lamb, they represented the body and blood of Christ. We now eat the bread and wine, remembering the body and blood of Christ that paid for our salvation and freedom. This is really helpful, actually. I hadn't thought about this, but we're going to be having communion on Sunday, and I'm going to be preaching on this passage, and it links very directly with the communion meal. So that's helpful. I like it when things like that happen, because we were due to have communion Sunday just gone, and then we had to cancel it at the last minute and put it on to next week, which we will do, and I will be pleased to relate this passage to that communion meal. I'm going to have to finish there. I know I've only got part way through the passage, but I hope you found that helpful. I'll see you on Sunday. If not, I'll see you next week. Alright, all the best. Take care. Bye.